Imagine the heat. It's July 6, 1415. We're in the city of Constance, Germany, right on the edge of the Swiss border. And the summer air is, it's heavy, but the atmosphere in the city square is something else. It's suffocating.
It really is. You've got this massive crowd gathered, thousands of people. We're talking princes, cardinals, commoners, everyone. And right in the middle of it all, this piece of grim theater, a man is being chained to a wooden stake.
And they haven't just tied him up, have they? The descriptions are brutal.
Oh, they're horrifying. They've piled straw and wood, all of it mixed with pitch, right up to his chin. It's like they're burying him in his own pyre before they even light it. He's been stripped of his clothes, stripped of his priesthood, and then there's the final insult.
The hat.
The hat. It's this tall, ridiculous paper hat, almost 2 feet high, and they've painted 3 devils on it, sort of dancing around. It's pure humiliation.
It's such a visceral image to start with, but I think we really have to begin at the end to understand why we're even talking about this man today. The man at the stake, his name is Jan Hus. He's a Czech theologian, a philosopher, a celebrity preacher, really.
Yeah, a rock star in Prague. And he spent the last several months chained in a dungeon, starving, sick. And yet, in this final moment, when the imperial marshal rides up and gives him one last out.
The final chance. Just recant. Just say the words, admit you were wrong, and you get to live.
And Hus just looks at him and refuses. That refusal is, it's one of the great pivot points of the late Middle Ages. He says, God is my witness that the things charged against me I never preached. In the truth of the gospel, which I have written, taught, and preached, I am ready to die today.
And that refusal is exactly what we're here to unpack today. Jan Hus is often called a proto-Protestant, living a full century before Martin Luther. But before we get into all the heavy theology and the politics, there's this little linguistic quirk that I find fascinating. It adds this layer of destiny to the whole story.
The name itself.
The name. In Czech, Hus literally means goose.
That's right. And he loved it. He leaned right into it. He was from a village called Husinec, which is basically Goose Town. And he used the pun all the time in his letters. He'd write to his friends, the goose is not yet cooked, or the goose is flying the coop.
It's incredible, but the legend really takes off right there at the stake. There's this story, and we should be clear, it was probably polished a bit by later historians, maybe even by Luther himself. But the story goes that as the flames were being lit, Hus made a prophecy.
This is a famous one, the swan prophecy. This is where history gets that cinematic flair,
Exactly.
He supposedly said, you may roast a weak goose today, but a swan will come after me whom you will not be able to burn.
And then 100 years later, Martin Luther shows up in Germany. He's got his hammer, his list of grievances, a very loud voice, and his followers just go.
There's the swan.
There it is.
And that's why, if you walk into a Lutheran church today, anywhere from Minnesota to Berlin, and you look at the lectern or the stained glass, you will very often see a swan. It's a direct callback to the Goose of Prague.
So whether he said those exact words or not, the sentiment is, it's historically undeniable, right? The church in 1415, they thought they were solving a problem. They thought they were scrubbing a stain out of the fabric of Christendom by burning this man.
They did. Instead, they lit a fuse that would, in many ways, blow the roof right off the Middle Ages.
So that's our mission today. We're going to do a proper deep dive on that explosion. We're looking at the letters, the trial transcripts, the contemporary chronicles to really get who Jan Hus was. And what I found so fascinating reading the source material is that this isn't just some dusty church story. It feels incredibly modern.
It really does. It's not just about, transubstantiation or some obscure point of theology. It's a story about national identity.
The Czechs versus the Germans.
A huge part of it. It's also about freedom of speech and, cancel culture in its most lethal medieval form. It's about institutional corruption. And at its core, it's a case study on the price of integrity.
Yeah, it asks that terrifying question. What is your conscience actually worth? Is it worth your career? Is it worth your reputation?
Is it worth your life?
And unlike most of us who might face that question in small ways, Hus faced it in the most absolute way possible.
He did.
Okay, so let's set the board. To understand why burning a popular priest was seen as the solution, we have to get the problem. And the problem in the year 1400 wasn't just that the church was corrupt, it was that the church was barely functioning. We are talking about the papal schism.
The Western Schism.
Yeah.
If you think modern politics is polarized, do you think having a divided government is bad? It has absolutely nothing on the Catholic Church in the late 14th century. For nearly 40 years, you had a situation where the church had 2 heads.
Which, just biologically speaking, is a monster.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And theologically, it was a complete nightmare. You had a pope in Rome, Gregory XII, claiming to be the vicar of Christ, the sole representative of God on earth, holding the keys to heaven and hell.
And at the exact same time?
At the exact same time, you had a pope in Avignon, France, Benedict XIII, claiming the exact same thing.
And this wasn't just a policy disagreement. It wasn't like one was a moderate and one was a progressive.
No. This was total war. They excommunicated each other. They called each other the Antichrist. They literally organized crusades against one another's followers. You have to imagine the spiritual anxiety this caused for the average person.
I want to pause on that for a second. Because for us, looking back, it's just, dates in a history book. But for a peasant or a merchant in 1400, it must have been psychologically devastating. You believe that the Pope holds the keys to the kingdom. If you're not in communion with the true Pope, you're going to hell. But there are two of them. How do you possibly choose?
That's the thing. You don't. Your king chooses for you. Europe was basically carved up along political lines. If you were French, you followed the Avignon Pope. If you were English or German or in Bohemia, you generally followed the Roman Pope.
So salvation becomes a matter of geography.
It completely delegitimized the institution. If the vessel of absolute truth is at war with itself, is it still the vessel of truth?
And all of that corruption was, it was trickling down. The sources are constantly mentioning simony in this period. Can we just define that? Because it sounds like a character from a nursery rhyme, but it's actually pretty serious.
Simony is the buying and selling of church offices. It's named after Simon Magus from the New Testament, who tried to buy the power of the Holy Spirit from the apostles.
Right.
By the 1400s, it was systemic. It was just how things were done. Imagine you wanted to be the Bishop of Prague. You wouldn't get the job because you were the holiest man in Bohemia. You would get it because you paid the Pope a massive bribe.
And where would you get that money?
You'd probably borrow it from, wealthy banking families. And once you have the job, you have to pay back that loan.
So you have to start making money.
Exactly. So how do you make money as a bishop? You charge your priests for their parishes. And how do the priests pay you? They charge the peasants for baptisms, for confessions, for last rites, for burials. It was a pyramid scheme of spiritual extortion. Everyone was squeezing the person below them to pay off the person above them.
It's just rotten from top to bottom. So everyone knows this is broken. The average person knows it. The kings know it. Even a lot of the clergy knows it. And the powers that be, they decide to fix it. This is where it gets. Well, it's almost comical in a very dark way.
Yes. They call it council. The Council of Pisa in 1409. The logic seems sound, right? Let's just fire both popes and hire a new one.
A clean slate. Simple.
Sound logic, but terrible execution. The cardinals from both sides met up. They declared both existing popes to be heretics and schismatics, and they elected a new guy, Alexander V. They thought, great, problem solved.
And everyone goes home happy.
If only. The other two popes, Gregory in Rome and Benedict in Avignon, they just refused to resign. They said, you can't fire me, I'm God's chosen, you're the heretics. So the result of this grand plan to fix the two-pope problem
Was 3 popes.
was that Christendom now had 3 popes.
It's a hydra. You cut off 2 heads and a third one just sprouts up.
Exactly. And this is the chaotic, cynical, broken world that Jan Hus is living in. He's in Prague. He's watching the moral authority of the entire world just crumble. And he isn't the only one noticing this. Which brings us to the intellectual godfather of this whole story. We have to talk about the English connection.
John Wycliffe. We've touched on him before in other deep dives, but he is absolutely central here.
He's the seed. John Wycliffe was a theologian at Oxford University a generation before Hus. And Wycliffe was, he was the flamethrower of his day. He looked at the church in the late 1300s and just said, this is all wrong. He attacked the wealth of the clergy. He attacked the authority of the Pope, saying a bad Pope has no authority at all. He even questioned the Eucharist. He was radical.
Now, usually, ideas in the Middle Ages travel pretty slowly. England is a long way from Bohemia. There's no Twitter. There's no printing press yet. But you found this really fascinating connection that acted as a sort of information superhighway.
The internet of the 14th century. It was a royal wedding. In 1382, King Richard II of England married Anne of Bohemia. She was the sister of the Czech king. And suddenly you have this massive cultural exchange between London and Prague.
Okay, so that opens a door.
A huge door. Czech students started going to Oxford on scholarships. They'd go there, they'd study, and they would pick up Wycliffe's books.
Which were probably buzzing with controversy at Oxford at the time.
Oh, absolutely. These were the banned books, the edgy books that everyone wanted to read. And these Czech students, they carried them back to Prague in their luggage. We even have records from 1406 of 2 students bringing a document with the seal of Oxford University to Prague, explicitly praising Wycliffe's work.
So Jan Hus is a young scholar in Prague. He's rising through the ranks, and he gets his hands on this imported literature.
Specifically, a book called the Trilogus. And Hus is just captivated. Now, we do have to be a little nuanced here. Hus didn't agree with everything Wycliffe wrote. Wycliffe was very radical on the Eucharist, for example. He basically denied transubstantiation.
The idea that the bread and wine literally become the body and blood of Christ.
Right. Hus was more conservative there. He stayed pretty orthodox on that point. But on the corruption, on the idea that the Bible is superior to the Pope, on the idea that the true church is the community of believers, not just the clerical hierarchy.
He was all in.
All in. He starts translating Wycliffe's works into Czech. He's basically distributing the underground literature of the Middle Ages. He's taking these high-level academic Latin critiques and making them available to everyone.
And he's doing this from a very powerful platform. This is where we need to look at who Hus actually was. I mean, he wasn't some grumpy hermit living in a cave, right?
Not at all. By 1402, he's the rector of the University of Prague. But even more importantly, he was the appointed preacher at a place called the Bethlehem Chapel.
The Bethlehem Chapel. This place comes up in every single source as a critical location. What made it so special? It wasn't a cathedral, was it?
No, not at all. It was more of a preaching hall. But it was massive. It could hold 3,000 people. I mean, that is a megachurch by medieval standards. But the key thing, the revolutionary thing, was its charter. It was founded specifically for preaching in the vernacular.
In Czech.
In Czech. And that is the game changer. In a normal church, the liturgy is in Latin. The Bible reading is in Latin. The mystery of faith is literally hidden behind a language barrier. The common people, they watch the show, they smell the incense, they see the gold vestments, but they don't really know the script.
It's a passive experience.
Very. But at the Bethlehem Chapel, his is taking these high-level academic debates about corruption, about the 3 popes, about simony, and he is explaining them to the shopkeepers and the blacksmiths and the farmers in their own language, in their own slang.
It's that feeling when you finally have a complex topic explained simply. It's empowering. It makes you feel smart, makes you feel involved.
He's democratizing theology. He's telling them, your priests are lying to you. They're stealing from you. And the Bible, which I'm now reading to you in your own language, says they are wrong. He's weaponizing the vernacular. And because of that, he becomes a folk hero almost overnight.
But this popularity, it starts to get tangled up with something else. We can't ignore the nationalism aspect here. The sources just keep bringing up Czech versus German.
Yes. You absolutely cannot understand the Hus story without understanding the ethnic tension in Prague at the time. Prague was this big cosmopolitan city. It was the capital of the Holy Roman Empire for a while. But the native Czech population often felt like, second-class citizens in their own home.
In what way?
Well, the upper clergy, mostly German. The wealthy merchants who owned the big townhouses on the square, mostly German. The city council, dominated by Germans. The Czechs felt squeezed, both economically and culturally. And this tension played out very aggressively at the university.
The Kutná Hora decree. This sounds like campus politics gone completely off the rails, but with, geopolitical stakes.
That is exactly what it is. The University of Prague was modeled on Paris, so it was divided into 4 nations for voting purposes. The Czech nation, the Bavarian nation, the Saxon nation, and the Polish nation.
And I'm guessing the Bavarian, Saxon, and Polish nations tended to vote together.
They were the German bloc.
Yeah.
Even the Polish nation at the university was, at the time, mostly staffed by German-speaking Salesians. So on any issue, hiring a professor, university policy, theological debates, the Germans had 3 votes and the Czechs had 1.
So the Czechs were permanently outvoted in their own university.
Always. It was incredibly frustrating for Czech scholars like Hus. It meant that university always leaned toward the German and Roman perspective. But then the papal schism breaks everything open.
How so?
King Wenceslas IV of Bohemia, who is a character in his own right, often drunk, very volatile, not the most stable guy, he wants the university to support the Pisa Pope, Alexander V. It helps his own political alliances in Europe.
So the king says, university, you need to vote for Alexander.
And the German nations at the university say, no, they refuse. They want to stick with the Roman Pope, Gregory XII. They openly defy the king.
So Hus and the Czechs see an opportunity.
A huge one. They go to the king and say, we'll support you, your majesty. We will back your pope.
And the king rewards their loyalty.
He flips the entire table. In 1409, at a place called Kutná Hora, He issues a decree that changes the university's constitution. Overnight, the Czech nation gets 3 votes, and the 3 foreign nations combined get only 1.
Wow. Talk about a power shift. It's a complete reversal.
It was a total humiliation for the Germans. And they didn't just grumble about it, they walked out. It was a mass exodus. The estimates vary, but we're talking somewhere between 800 and 2,000 German masters and students just packed up and left Prague.
Where did they go?
Many of them went on to found the University of Leipzig in Germany. But the bigger problem for Hus is that they left angry.
Yeah.
They went out into the rest of Europe, to Vienna, to Heidelberg, to Cologne, and they were spreading a narrative.
That narrative was...
Prague is a nest of heretics. They hate the church. They follow that crazy Englishman Wycliffe. They're dangerous rebels.
So Hus wins the battle for Prague. He becomes the first Czech rector under the new system, but he loses the public relations war in Europe.
Completely. He basically painted a giant target on his own back.
Yeah.
To the rest of the world, he was now the ringleader of this rebellious, heretical city. He was isolated.
Okay, so we have the schism, we have the nationalism, the vernacular preaching, but the spark that really lights the fire, the thing that moves this whole thing from an academic dispute to a death sentence, is indulgences. We usually associate this with Luther and the 95 Theses, but Hus was there a century earlier.
It's almost the exact same story, history rhyming perfectly. It's 1411. We have a new piece of Pope, John the 23rd.
And we should be very clear, this is not the beloved modern Pope John the 23rd who called Vatican II. This guy was a piece of work.
He was a gangster in robes. Before he was Pope, Baldassare Cosa was a military man, possibly a pirate in his youth. I mean, a total warlord. And in 1411, he wants to wage a war against the King of Naples, who's protecting one of his rival popes.
And wars are expensive.
Very. Mercenaries need to be paid. So to fund it, he issues a massive sale of indulgences across Europe.
For the listener who might be a little rusty on medieval theology, an indulgence is basically a certificate that reduces your time in purgatory after you die.
Correct. The idea is that the church controls this treasury of merit, the surplus goodness of Christ and the saints. You pay money to the church, and the Pope draws on that treasury to pay off your debt of sin. But in this case, it was explicitly for war. The sales pitch was basically, give me money so I can hire soldiers to kill my enemies and I'll get you into heaven faster.
It's so transactional. You're funding bloodshed with spiritual promises.
And Hus looked at this and was just appalled. He couldn't reconcile it with the Bible at all. He stands up in the Bethlehem Chapel and he thunders against it. He says, the Pope cannot buy forgiveness. Only God forgives. He argued that no Pope has the right to take up the sword. He said, man obtains forgiveness of sins by true repentance, not by money.
That's a direct challenge to the Pope's wallet and his power.
And the city just exploded. You have to remember, the Czechs were already fired up. They saw this foreign Pope trying to fleece them to fight a war in Italy they couldn't care less about. There were protests and then tragedy.
The 3 students?
Yes, 3 young men. Their names were Martin, Jan, and Stykek. They interrupted a priest who was selling indulgences in a church. They called it a lie. They shouted, the Pope is lying to us. And they were arrested by the city authorities.
And Hus pleaded for them, but...
He did. He begged for leniency. But the authorities, probably under pressure from the German faction on the council, had them beheaded in the street.
The first martyrs.
The first blood. And the reaction from the Hussite movement was so telling. They didn't back down. Hus didn't say, okay, guys, let's cool it. They took the bodies of those 3 boys, carried them in a solemn procession, and buried them in the Bethlehem Chapel with reverence, as if they were saints. This was the point of no return. The church realized, we can't just debate this guy, we have to crush him.
So the Pope strikes back. Excommunication.
Aggravated excommunication, yes. But they went even further. They placed the entire city of Prague under an interdict.
Can you explain what an interdict actually felt like for a city? Because it sounds like this sort of dry legal term, but it was much more visceral than that.
Oh, it was the ultimate collective punishment. A spiritual blockade. It means that as long as Jan Hus is present in the city of Prague, the church goes on strike. No masses can be said, no babies can be baptized, no couples can be married, and most terrifyingly of all, no Christian burials.
So if your mother dies while the interdict is in effect...
She's thrown in a ditch in unconsecrated ground. For a medieval person, that means her soul is in mortal peril. It puts the spiritual safety of every single citizen at risk. It's designed to turn the population against the troublemaker. The neighbors start looking at Hus and saying, get out. You are hurting us.
It's weaponizing the people against him. Get rid of Hus or your grandmother goes to hell.
Exactly. And Hus, to his credit, he didn't want the city to suffer. He realized his presence was the problem. So he leaves Prague. He goes into a self-imposed exile in the countryside, staying at the castles of sympathetic nobles who protect him.
But he doesn't stay quiet out there in the countryside.
Not at all. In fact, this exile period is incredibly productive for him. He realizes that while the university scholars can read his dense Latin treatises, the common people need guidance. So he starts writing furiously in Czech. This is when he writes his most famous work, De Ecclesia, the Church.
And in De Ecclesia, he makes a claim that it really undermines the whole Catholic structure. He redefines what the church actually is.
Right. He argues that the Pope is only the head of the church, if he lives according to the Bible. If he doesn't, he's just another man. Hus defines the true church as the body of the predestined, the invisible community of true believers, regardless of their rank or status.
So it's not the institution.
It's not the institution. The institution is not the same as the spiritual reality. You can be a bishop and not be part of the true church if you're wicked. You can be a peasant and be a key member of the true church. It's radical stuff.
And during this time, he does something seemingly small, but with this huge impact on the Czech language itself. He literally changes the alphabet.
He does. He was a teacher at heart. He looked at Czech spelling, which was a mess, and he wanted to make it easier for people to read and write. So he introduced the Háček, that little hook or check mark you see above letters like shish and shis in Czech today.
What did that do?
It standardized the spelling. It replaced the need to write multiple letters to make a single sound. It's a legacy that every single Czech speaker uses every single day 600 years later.
That's wild. It's like if Shakespeare had also invented a few new letters for the alphabet while writing Hamlet.
It shows his commitment to the people. He wanted the Bible and religious texts to be accessible. He wanted literacy to spread.
But while he's writing in the countryside, he makes a move that the sources all call revolutionary. On October 18th, 1412, he makes a formal legal appeal. But he doesn't appeal to the Pope.
No. He's given up on the popes by this point. He realizes the whole system is rigged against him. So he formally appeals his case directly to Jesus Christ.
Which sounds very pious to us, but legally in that time.
Legally, it was anarchy. The entire medieval structure was built on the idea that the church is the sole mediator between man and God. You can't just go over their heads to the CEO. By appealing to Christ, Hus was effectively saying, your entire hierarchy is irrelevant if it acts against Scripture. I am bypassing your earthly courts and going straight to the supreme judge. It was a total rejection of their jurisdiction.
So now he's a complete rogue agent. He has bypassed the entire system. And now the powers that be decide they need to settle this once and for all. This is where King Sigismund of Hungary enters the picture.
Sigismund is the brother of the Bohemian King Wenceslaus. He's also the king of the Romans, the head of the Holy Roman Empire, effectively. He's the most powerful secular ruler in Europe. And he has two big problems he wants to solve: the three popes and the Bohemian heresy. So he calls a massive general council in the city of Constance in 1414.
The Council of Constance. This is the Super Bowl of medieval church politics. And they invite Hus.
They do. Sigismund sends a message to Hus. Come to Constance, explain your views to the assembled fathers of the church. We will hear you out.
And Hus agrees to go. Why? I mean, did he really think he could convince them?
He did. Hus was a true academic and a true believer at heart. He thought, if I can just show them the Bible, if I can just explain my logic clearly, they will see that I am right. He didn't see himself as a heretic. He saw himself as a faithful Catholic reformer. He thought, once they hear the truth, they'll have to agree.
It seems tragically naive looking back.
It does. But he wasn't completely naive. He knew it was dangerous. He wrote his will before he left. He wrote letters to his followers saying, if I die. But he thought he had an ace in the hole.
The Safe Conduct Pass.
The Salvo Conductus, a formal document issued by the King of the Romans himself. It guaranteed that Hus should be allowed to pass to Constance, stay there, and, this is the crucial part, return to Bohemia freely and securely.
Return securely, that's the promise.
That's the promise. So Hus arrives in Constance in November 1414. And at first he's free. He's staying with a widow in town. But, and this is classic Hus, he can't stop himself. He keeps preaching. He says mass in his private room. People start gathering to hear him, and the local clergy are furious. They're saying the heretic is here, and he's still spreading his poison.
So the trap springs.
Rumors start flying that Hus is planning to flee, which was completely untrue. And the church authorities have him arrested on November 28th. They drag him away from his dinner table.
But wait a minute, what about the safe conduct? The king's personal promise?
Sigismund was reportedly furious at first. He felt his honor was being violated. He stormed out of the council chamber. He threatened to leave Constance. But the prelates, the high church officials, they took him aside. And they used this very dangerous, very chilly piece of medieval logic on him.
What did they tell him?
They told him promises made to heretics are not binding. They argued that his duty to God and the unity of the church outweighed his promise to a single man accused of heresy. They effectively said, if you protect him, you're hindering the work of the Holy Spirit.
Wow. No faith need be kept with heretics.
That's the phrase. And Sigismund caved. He withdrew his protection. He chose the political unity of the council over his personal honor. And from that moment, Jan Hus was doomed.
And he's thrown into a dungeon. And we're not talking about a modern jail cell here.
No. He was moved to Gottlieben Castle. He was held in a tower, often chained day and night. One source says his arm was chained to the wall, his feet were in irons. The food was terrible and scarce. The cell was right next to the castle latrines, so the smell was unbearable. He became severely ill. He had hemorrhoids. He was vomiting blood. He had raging fevers. He spent 73 days in these conditions completely isolated.
It sounds like they were trying to break him psychologically before the trial even began.
Absolutely. They wanted a broken, defeated man to walk into that trial and just say, I give up. I recant.
But when the trial finally happens in June of 1415, he isn't broken.
He's physically weak, but his mind is sharp as a tack. He's brought before the council, this huge assembly of cardinals in their red robes, bishops, theologians, and they refused to give him a defense lawyer. That was forbidden in heresy trials. He stood alone.
And how did the trial actually work?
It wasn't a trial in our sense of finding out the truth. It was a verification of guilt. They read out 39 sentences that they had extracted from his writings. Some of them were accurate, quotes, things he actually believed, like, a pope who sins is not the true head of the church.
Which he would admit to.
Yes. He would say, I wrote that, and here's the Bible verse that supports my position. But then they read things he never said. They accused him of claiming he was the fourth person of the Trinity. Complete fabrications.
And when he tried to defend himself, to explain the context,
They just shouted him down. The records say the noise was so loud at times that he couldn't even be heard. They screamed, burn him! Burn him! Whenever he tried to explain the nuance of his position.
and his defense strategy just remained the same through it all. Show me in the Bible.
That was his constant refrain. Convince me from Scripture. He said, I am willing to recant if my errors should be proven to me from the Bible. But the council wasn't interested in a Bible study. They were interested in submission. Their position was, the authority of the church says you are wrong, therefore you are wrong. Recant.
It's a clash of two different operating systems, isn't it? Hus is running on sola scriptura, scripture alone, before that was even a term. The council is running on authority of the institution. They literally can't communicate.
Right. And then they tried to trap him with a blanket recantation. They asked him to sign a single document recanting all 39 articles.
So if he signs it, he's recanting the things he actually believes.
Yes.
But he is also admitting that he taught the crazy things he never taught.
Exactly. It is the classic, when did you stop beating your wife trap?
Yeah.
If he says, I recant, he is confessing to being a heretic on points where he was actually orthodox. He would be lying. And he said, how can I recant what I never held? I would be bearing false witness against myself.
So it came down to conscience.
It did. He refused to lie to save his own skin. He wrote a letter from prison saying, I write this in chains, expecting my death. I would not, for a chapel full of gold, recant from the truth.
So we arrive at July 6th, 1415, the final day. And it starts with this ceremony of degradation. This is a highly ritualized process, isn't it? They don't just kill him, they have to unmake him as a priest first.
It's chillingly theatrical. They bring him to the cathedral. They dress him in his full priestly vestments, the alb, the stole, the chasuble. They put a chalice in his hand. It's like they're getting him ready to perform Mass one last time.
And then they just reverse it.
Step by step. A bishop takes the chalice from his hand and says, we take from thee the cup of redemption, thou accursed Judas. Hus just replies, but I trust in God that I shall drink it this day in his kingdom. They rip the robes off him one by one.
And then they go for his haircut.
The tonsure, that shaved spot on a priest's head. They took shears and just hacked at his hair to destroy it, to erase the mark of his ordination. They even argued amongst themselves over whether to shave it or cut it, just to mock him.
And finally, the paper hat.
The caputium, that tall paper mitre, painted with devils fighting for his soul, and inscribed with the single Latin word, heresiarcha.
Ringleader of heretics.
Exactly. They were literally demonizing him before they killed him.
The church then says, we have nothing more to do with you, and hands him over to the secular arm, the soldiers, for execution, because technically, the church doesn't spill blood.
A very convenient legal fiction. We're not killing you, The state is. They handed him over to Sigismund's men.
And they lead him out of the city to a place called the Brule, a meadow outside the walls. The stake is waiting.
He walked calmly. The sources say he prayed and sang hymns on the way. When he saw the stake, he knelt down and prayed again. The executioners stripped him of his remaining clothes, tied his hands behind his back, and chained his neck to the post. They piled the wood and straw mixed with pitch all around him.
And then there's that one last moment, the final chance. The imperial marshal, a man named von Pappenheim, rides up on his horse. The fire hasn't been lit yet. And he looks at Hus and asks him one last time, recant, save yourself.
And Hus looks out over the crowd, over the wood that is about to consume him, and he says it. God is my witness that the things charged against me I never preached. In the truth of the gospel which I have written, taught, and preached, I am ready to die today.
He didn't waver, not for a second.
I didn't. He chose the truth over his life. And then the fire was lit.
And there's that incredible, heartbreaking anecdote about the old woman, Sancta Simplicitas.
Yes. So the fire is either struggling to catch, or maybe it's not burning hot enough at first. And this old peasant woman, probably very pious, probably believing every single thing the priest had ever told her. She thinks she's doing a good deed for God. She comes shuffling up and throws a little bundle of brushwood onto the fire to help burn the heretic.
She thinks she is helping God by killing him.
Precisely. And Hus sees her. He's already in agony. The heat is rising. And he doesn't curse her. He doesn't scream at her. He looks at her and says, "O sancta simplicitas, O holy simplicity."
That's just, it's heartbreaking.
It is. He pitied her. He saw her as another victim of the same system that was killing him, a system that had taught her that hate was an act of piety. He forgave her ignorance in his dying breath.
And as the flames rose, he didn't scream in agony. He sang.
He chanted the Kyrie eleison, Lord, have mercy. He sang, Christ, Son of the living God, have mercy on us. He sang until the smoke choked him and finally silenced his voice.
And they didn't just leave his body there. They were incredibly thorough.
They were terrified of him becoming a martyr with relics. They knew that if they left a single bone, his followers would take it back to Prague and build a shrine around it. So they waited until the body was consumed. Then they smashed his skull and bones with clubs to break them into the smallest possible pieces. They found his heart, which hadn't burned completely, and threw it back into the fire. Then they shoveled up all the ashes, the dirt around the stake, everything, and threw it all into the Rhine River.
To erase him. No grave, no bones, no trace.
They wanted to wash him out of history completely.
But you can't drown an idea in a river, can you?
You cannot. In fact, the execution had the exact opposite effect. The council thought, okay, the goose is cooked, problem solved, the Czechs will be scared now and they'll get back in line. But when the news of the execution reached Prague, it wasn't fear that took over. It was pure rage.
Which brings us to the aftermath. The swan sings. Or, more accurately, the swan's followers start swinging swords.
The Bohemian protest. In September of 1415, just a couple of months after the execution, 452 Bohemian nobles signed a document. They put their formal wax seals on it, and they sent it to the Council of Constance.
What did it say?
It basically said, Jan Hus was a good and righteous man. He was a faithful Catholic. You who executed him are the traitors. You are the murderers. And we will defend the law of God and the freedom to preach it with our blood if we have to.
That is a declaration of war.
It was. And the church responded in kind, the new pope, Martin V, because they did finally elect a single pope at Constance. He issued a bull authorizing a crusade against the Hussites. He called on all of Christendom to march on Bohemia and crush them.
A crusade against fellow Christians in the heart of Europe.
Yes, the Hussite Wars. They lasted from 1419 to 1434. And this is where the story just becomes a military miracle. The Catholic Church and the Holy Roman Empire launched 5 consecutive crusades against tiny Bohemia. The Teutonic Knights, the Knights of Germany, Austria, Hungary, mercenaries from all over Europe. They all marched on Prague.
And Bohemia won.
Bohemia won. They didn't just survive. They utterly crushed the Crusader armies time after time.
How? I mean, they were peasants and minor nobles against the armored might of all of Europe.
They had a secret weapon, a general named Jan Hus.
Tell us about Ishka.
He is one of the greatest military geniuses in history, and he is almost unknown outside of this specific context. He was a one-eyed veteran, and later in the wars he went completely blind, but continued to command the armies to victory from a wagon. He realized his peasant army couldn't fight armored knights in an open field, so he invented the wagonburg.
The wagon fort.
Exactly. He took ordinary farm wagons, armored them with thick wooden planks and iron chains. He would circle them up on a hilltop or chain them together in a line to create a mobile fortress. and he loaded them with men carrying early firearms, hand cannons, and crossbows.
So he invented medieval tanks.
Effectively, yes. The knights would charge, expecting to just run down these peasants, but they would smash into this wall of wood. The Hussites would then blast them with gunpowder and crossbow bolts from behind cover. The horses would panic, the knights would get bogged down, and then once the charge was broken, the Hussites would pour out from between the wagons with these terrifying flails-modified grain threshers with spikes on the end and just finish them off.
That's incredible.
It was psychological warfare, too. The Hussites would march into battle singing these defiant hymns like, "Ye who are warriors of God." By the time of the Fourth Crusade, the massive Crusader army heard the Hussites singing in the distance, and they literally turned and ran away before the battle even started. They were terrified of the heretics.
So the church, this mighty institution that burned Hus, eventually has to basically surrender.
They were forced to the negotiating table. They realized they could not kill the Hussite movement. So in 1436, they agreed to the Basel Compacts.
What was that?
It was a compromise, but a historic one. The church officially allowed the Bohemians to practice their own version of Christianity. They could give the cup of wine to the laity during communion, which was a huge Hussite demand, a symbol of spiritual equality. It was essentially the first time a group had successfully broken away from the uniformity of Rome and survived.
So as Hus didn't live to see it, but his ideas won.
In a huge way, yes. A century later, something like 90% of the Czech lands were Hussite in one form or another.
And the legacy continues. We mentioned the connection to Luther.
Oh, it's direct. Luther found a copy of Huss's sermons in a library when he was a young monk, and he was shocked. He wrote to a friend, "I have been teaching all of Huss's ideas without knowing it. We are all Hussites." Hus paved the road that Luther would eventually walk on.
And what about today?
Well, there's the Moravian Church, the Unitas Fratrum, which traces its roots directly back to Huss's followers. They're still active all over the world today, known for their focus on simplicity and service.
And the Catholic Church itself finally addressed this, didn't they? It took a little while.
It took nearly 600 years. But in 1999, Pope John Paul II issued an apology. He expressed deep regret for the cruel death inflicted on Hus, and he praised his moral courage. The Goose finally got his apology from the Swan's successors.
And in the Czech Republic today, July 6th is a national holiday, Jan Hus Day.
He's consistently voted the greatest Czech hero in national surveys. If you go to the Old Town Square in Prague today, there's this massive brooding statue of him right in the center, dominating the square. And the motto of the Czech president is, "Truth prevails, pravda vítězí." That is a direct Hussite slogan.
It's a staggering story. From a poor boy in a village called Goose Town to a man who changed the course of history simply by saying no.
It's the power of the individual conscience. Hus wasn't some radical anarchist who wanted to burn the world down. He was a man who believed that truth was objective, and that authority, no matter how powerful, was not absolute. He believed that if the king or the pope contradicts the truth, you follow the truth.
Which brings us to our final thought for you, the listener. This story, for all its medieval context, feels incredibly relevant to the world we live in now.
It really does.
Yeah.
Jan Hus died because he refused to admit to errors he didn't commit. He could have walked away. He could have just nodded, said, "I recant," signed the paper, and gone back to a quiet life. I mean, no one would have really blamed him.
In our age, we are just flooded with information. Truth can feel so flexible. Spin is everything.
Yeah.
And we are so often pressured to just go along to get along in our jobs, our social circles, our politics.
Exactly. So the question Hus leaves us with is, what is the price of your personal integrity? If you were bound to that stake and all you had to do was say a few words you didn't believe in order to save your own life, would you do it? Or would you have the courage to be the goose that refuses to be cooked?
That's a heavy question to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fire.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.